Okay, here we go. Oh yeah. Here we go.
Christopher Robin, what exactly is doing nothing?
Well, I'm told it means going along, listening to all the things you can't hear, and not bothering.
Forever.
Let's go.
Take those pills. Take those pills. Hey, here you go. Itching, sweating, take those pills. Thirsty.
Hi, this is Blake at Human Factor, and we make podcasts for associations easy in 3 ways. Just remember WWW. First, the why. Why are we creating this podcast? And are there any others like it? This will help us implement a strategy for success and help find a way to integrate the podcast into your existing strategy. The next is workflow. We have to figure out a workflow to get the show recorded. Whether you want to come to our studio, record on the road, or record from your office, we've done it all, so we can figure out what's best for you and what fits your budget. Last is the what, as in what to do with this. Since now we have goals defined in the strategy and some content created, we can talk about how to promote the show and maximize this content. We can figure out what social media platforms and different ways to boost it to the listenership. At Human Factor, we love helping membership-based organizations with their podcasts and add value to their community. For more tips and tricks, free videos and articles about podcasting, go to humanfactor.net.
Welcome to Association Chat, produced by Amplified Growth and Human Factor, talking about all things association, nonprofit, and anything else that pops into my mom's head. And now, here is your host, Kiki L'Italian.
All right, we're here, Blake. Oh my gosh. And we're not even doing it on a Tuesday.
No.
It's crazy.
What's she going to say this time?
It's a good question. She asks me that. I don't know what to say, but yeah.
You shouldn't.
I actually do, though.
I never know what we're going to say.
You don't know what we're going to say. I have a pretty good idea about at least what we're going to talk about.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Pretty.
So I have a question for you, actually.
Shoot.
I wanted to ask you, this whole thing about fake news and, the media is the enemy and not... How do you feel about how much you trust organizations right now? How much do you trust what you see or hear?
My lovely wife works at AFP,
Okay.
Agence France Presse, I believe, the AP. So we have long discussions about this.
Okay.
And then what is fake news exactly? Like, here's an example. It's like everyone has a little bit of bias, one way or the other. So as an example, you could be pro-life or anti-abortion, that kind of thing. So, and we have long discussions about this because she works with a bunch of journalists all day long. So do I have an opinion?
Yeah.
I don't exactly know what fake news is. It's like porn. I know it when I see it.
Well, let's talk about trust. And we're going to get into this. We're going to go actually into talking about communications challenges that leaders and executives in organizations are facing every day.
Every day.
No matter where you are in the world, we are living in a time when there is an amazing amount of political unrest, societal norms are changing, and at the same time, we still have to communicate. And so leaders for organizations, leaders for associations, communication leaders are all trying to figure out, how do we communicate without making everyone upset with us? How do we do this in a way where we can get stuff done and not have people disconnect right out of the gate? It's an amazing problem.
And we're going to tie this. We're going to tie this into associations. It's going to be amazing.
It's all about associations and organizations who are trying to figure out how to make this communication happen, because there's a lot that needs to be done, and we need to figure out how to do it.
But before we do that,
my first thing to say about communications is I want to thank our sponsors.
Yes,
I want to thank our wonderful sponsors, Human Factor. Want to say hi?
I'm putting it up. Hi, Human Factor. What do we do again? We do. I'm putting it up on the screen. There we go. We do podcasts for associations and organizations. And who else? Who's next?
Human workplaces. Let's stay with the humans.
All
human
right,
workplaces.
The humans. Hold on. That's on the screen now.
Yep.
And what do they do?
Human workplaces, all about workplace culture. You want to look at figuring out how to make things a little bit nicer where you are and how people can work together better. Talk to Human Workplaces. All right, so
here's a new one.
I was going to talk about amplified growth and then go.
All right, do amplified growth.
Amplified growth, community architect, and digital strategy technologist. That's me. If you want to ask how to communicate with folks and bring people together, I can help you do that.
Right.
And Boulder. This is the new sponsor. Welcome, Boulder, to becoming a sponsor, a trusted partner with Association Chat. And they engage in digital transformation projects for associations.
And they said a nice thing about you.
They said an amazingly nice thing about me.
You're going to read that whole thing? How about the first paragraph?
I'll read the first paragraph.
I mean, the first sentence, maybe.
You know what? I think that maybe we should save it for another time.
Okay.
All right. So let's move on and talk about our topic for today. All right. So I'm going to read this little thing. There was a quote that came from Phil Riggins. He's the founder of the Brand and Reputation Collective, the BRC in the UK.
Okay.
And he says that he lives by this mantra, and it is you're only 2 clicks away from uncovering a lie. All right. Is that true? The 2019 Edelman Trust Barometer reveals that trust has changed profoundly in the past year. People have shifted their trust to the relationships within their control, most notably their employers. Globally, 75% of people trust my employer to do what's right, significantly more than NGOs at 57%, business 56%, and media 47%. So regularly, Edelman's Trust Barometer comes out, and the last couple of years, it's been really, really low on media and government. Media and government.
But what about associations?
Well, associations, all right. This is part of what we're going to get into. So what I want to do is I want to introduce our guest for today.
Yeah, we got a bunch.
Yeah, we do. And a couple of them might be jet lagged with us today.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. And so I want to introduce Gary LaBranche. He's the president and CEO of the National Investor Relations Institute. I want to introduce... Thank you for being with us. I want to introduce Matthew Duva. He is the executive director of the International Association for the Study of Pain. Yeah. Hi. And then Nick Parker. He's the president of Frederick Reed Marketing, Media, and Communications, and also the president and publisher of the Link to Lee's Summit podcast.
Cool.
So he has an interesting perspective.
Who are we starting with?
We're starting with Gary and with Matt. And it's whoever jumps into this first. So because of this recent Edelman Trust Barometer, the findings that come from that, and many of the news stories that we're seeing about data breaches, fake news, the changes in cultural mores, how has that actually impacted the way that you communicate, or has it? And have you felt more pressure in how you communicate with the people that you're responsible for communicating with your audience? So I'll start with that because, with associations, you've got boards, councils, your members, the public, the media. So Gary or Matt, which one of you feel so inclined to jump in?
Well, good morning. This is Gary, and it's great to be here with you again. And I am a little jet lagged. I just returned from 10 days in Australia. So good day, mates, and all that business. If you ever get a chance, I highly recommend visit Sydney, Australia. But I was, as I was thinking about this topic, I was reminded of a quote from another famous American who said that in the last 10 years, this trust in media and in public institutions has dramatically declined more so than in his entire lifetime. Of course, that famous American was John Adams, who said that in 1798. So I'm not so sure. True, absolutely true story. So I'm not so sure that distrust in institutions and media is necessarily a new thing. I think it's a more present thing, and I think we all feel it more painfully today. I certainly do. It was interesting to read the Edelman Trust Barometer. Edelman is one of my members, and so we actually covered this their Trust Barometer every single year. And I actually got to visit with the folks on their team that were responsible in part for putting that Trust Barometer out. It's an interesting methodology that they use. I found it interesting that NGOs, as they're termed in this survey, associations and other nonprofits, are actually rated higher than many other types of institutions like business and media itself. That we're quite ahead of media. So, I do think that shows the relationship of members to their associations as a community of trust. Now, I'm not saying that they trust everything we say or everything that is said by the association, but I do think that members, because of their affinity, their loyalty, their connection with their membership organization, do look to their organization as a source of trusted news and information. And to the extent that we meet that expectation and carry that culture of trust, then I think we're really serving a very valuable purpose. The extent that we help to disseminate bad information or perpetuate fake news, I think then that trust starts to break down very, very rapidly.
Yeah, Matt, what do you think about that?
So I agree with the wise Gary LaBranche, of course. And so I too was very excited, pleased to see the high mark that NGOs fared in the survey. We, as at ISP, we are an NGO. We are actually officially in relations with the WHO, the World Health Organization, and really serve in that role. And I think that as an NGO and as an association, and additionally as a scientific society, we make our living, we build our reputation on science and evidence-based information and credibility. So I don't know that we have necessarily as an organization changed the way that we communicate with our members or with outside audiences. But I do think that one of the things that we are even more vigilant potentially about is recognition and the importance of evidence-based decision-making of data and using data to make informed decisions, whether it's decisions that affect our members or affect patients or affect clinical treatment. or simply how we communicate and what we communicate about our organization and what we do and how effectively we do that. So if I like to be a positive person, so if there's a positive spin to what I think was a negative question, not to put words in your mouth, Kiki, but I do think that's an opportunity for us as leaders and in leading organizations to be mindful of our important role of building that credibility and being that maybe that voice of reason, or maybe that showing that leadership role in making sure that we're pushing for evidence, for science, and for the building of that science.
Right. I mean, I think that's such a challenge, because I was having a discussion actually with one of your colleagues who, Kristen Clark, who I hope she doesn't mind that I bring her name into this, but she was telling me that some of the word choices, just because internationally, if you were to use the word national, it could accidentally be used. It's just mentioning it in an article, it could make people think of nationalist, which would lead into a negative direction. And she was telling me that even in the crafting of messages, that a lot of times it's word choices, it's things that she's had to become more aware of, and that it's an ongoing learning process. I think that because of all of the different things that are coming up today with our society in the United States, with the changes that are happening globally, with women and the women's movement, Me Too, I know that there are a lot of sensitivities that are taking place, and people are worried about saying the wrong thing. How do you, as leaders in your organizations, grapple with that when you go out and you're speaking extemporaneously all the time? When I was putting together my thoughts and my questions for today's discussion, I immediately thought of, maybe they're just so good that they don't worry about this. They don't ever find themselves searching for the right thing to say. But I'm like, come on, it has to be at a point where you're like, ooh, okay, tread lightly here. And I just wondered if you had established any rules for the road, so to speak, as things have gotten a little bit more complex. And that's that.
This is where you address the person.
I know.
Say, Nick, what do you think of that?
So, and sometimes I'm just thinking that somebody's going to be on the edge of their seat and like, but I've got the rules. I'm saying Gary. I saw him look like he was moving toward to say, I'm looking at nonverbals.
It's a little more difficult using this sort of technology, and you're not quite there. You can't pick up on those immediate cues. But it's a very good question, and I think it's a very difficult thing to manage these days. And I'll give you a personal example. I write a weekly column to my membership, and I cover all sorts of topics. And obviously, one of them is advocacy, because we advocate on behalf of our members. Our members are senior executives in all of America's publicly traded companies. So we represent the capital markets community. So it's the largest publicly traded company in America. And so I was simply sharing our sort of an analysis of where things are playing with our new Congress now in session. How our advocacy positions stack up against the chairs and the new chairs of our key committees. And I sort of went through, this is what this chair thinks of our positions, and here's a quote from that person, and here's this subcommittee chair, and here's where, we think we might have disagreements and why, and here's a quote from that person. But very factual, very, that sort of thing. And I got immediate letters or emails coming back, most saying, positive things. It seems going to be more difficult now with the new Congress and everything. But I got a couple of people back to me saying that I was anti-woman.
Wow.
And I was anti-woman because while I had accurately quoted two women chairs and their positions on our positions, or their response to our positions, and I had quoted two male chairs and their responses, which were pretty much the same, it was perceived as anti-woman because I was seen as disagreeing with a female committee chair. And all I was doing was simply saying this was her, views of our positions, just as I said, this is his views of our position. And, I would not have anticipated that something like that would have been viewed as anti-woman. But at least two readers thought that was anti-women simply because I disagreed with a female member of Congress's position relative to our publicly stated position. And that clearly, I was a right wing and, all these extremists and all these sorts of things, very, very out of proportion blowback to this sort of thing. And I shared that with my female chair and incoming chair, and they were incredulous that was a response, and they assured me that they didn't share that view, having worked with me and that sort of thing. So it just sort of comes out in ways that I think are somewhat least expected. And what I've learned from that experience is you really do have to think through potential responses to every single thing you say. And we now rehearse, practice, if you will, key phrases that we have tried to hone so as to make our positions clear or our point of view clear, while trying to protect any opportunity for others to come back and either flip that comment in a negative way or twist that comment in a different way than was intended, or somehow offend someone. Because you never know these days how something will.
Hey, I'm curious,
someone.
how many people did that? Do we know how many people saw that, the thing you wrote?
Oh, a couple thousand.
So 2 out of 1,000?
Or 2 out of 2,000, yeah.
And I got more positives. I got 20 or 30 people saying, "Oh, thank you, this is right on,"
right?
That sort of thing. But I did get two that where not only they didn't necessarily disagree with what I had to say, they simply felt that my comments were anti-women because I disagreed with two women.
I mean, it's a danger, and I know that things even back in the day when I was communicating with a number of different international chapter leaders and things like that, back when I worked in associations, I remember that it was already complicated because you are things like humor in emails and stuff that doesn't always translate the best, and you already have to be sensitive about the way that you communicate. But I feel that people are on hyper alert for a number of different, what's their stance on this, and trying to look for
I agree.
Trying to look for areas where there might be difficult, and I can't even imagine, the pressure that I would feel at that point. I feel pressure even for association chat, and feel like I have to be careful about some of the things that I say here too.
I don't.
We need to talk after this episode.
But hold
Blake,
on,
really.
but I think there's something to that. I mean, someone's going to be offended.
Yeah.
And isn't that the what we always talk about with the associations, that they don't take the risks?
Well,
they're a bunch of chickens.
They're not. It's not a bunch of. We have a lot of. That's nice. It's a nice sound effect. I'm very impressed that you could just pull it out like that. And Michael, who is watching right now, hi Michael. He says, "Don't you think the issue stems from our inability to talk generally about gender and race? To talk generally about gender and race, that it's been so sensitive for so long that the problem is that we can't. Right? We can't have just a regular discussion about it, that we have to dance around these topics."
Yeah.
And you might have something there. Stacy says, while it's important to be inclusive, if you're constantly walking on eggshells with hopes to not offend anyone, how effective can you get the message across? How effectively? Thank you. You can tell that she's an editor because she went back and edited her comment in the chat.
Well, good for her.
Yes. I
like
know.
her.
Well, and hearing your voice, Nick, that makes me think I need to bring you into the fray. We need to talk with Nick because...
Is Nick going to offend us? Is he going to say something offensive?
Well, Nick
I hope so.
I don't know his history. We go back. I
was hearing stories before you came on.
We went to the same university, so difficult. He has journalism in his blood.
Yep.
So, Nick, you dance this dance between marketing and communications for your clients, and you host a podcast with a regional focus. It's in Lee Summit, Missouri. And so, you know, I'm sure that as you're representing different businesses and you're helping people with their communications, that you occasionally run into some communication challenges. And so what I wanted to find out from you is, have you felt the sting of a lack of trust in media in your experience, and how is that showing up for you in your business today?
Well, I absolutely do straddle both of them. And thanks for having me on, Kiki, because it's awesome to see how great you've done in the last 20 years, 25 years.
Don't tell. Why are you sharing numbers? Why?
I will allow them to donate money to a good cause, and I'll tell all the bad stories.
Oh, can we get his video off now,
yeah,
Blake?
You have those buttons.
I'm going to cut him out. Okay.
You know, I do straddle both lines, and you generously actually called my podcast regional. It's not. It's very hyper local for a reason. I have a local site linked to Lee Summit, and then a partnering podcast, Lee Summit Town Hall, mainly because I just wanted to be in media again. I spent most of my life there, but I think a lot of that lack of trust in media and what it is, it starts on a local level. I think you've seen a decline in locally owned newspapers and other news media, and that people don't know the guy that covers their town anymore. And so that makes it very hard then to trust the regional TV person and then the national TV person, because you don't have that relationship with the person who brings you the news anymore. And so I've made a very intentional move to just talk about things here and to talk about the people in their backyard. I'm very fond of telling people that you have more ability to affect change right in your backyard than you do anywhere else. So this is the place to get involved.
Yeah. And for associations, to bring it back around, you know, I think that that's the professional home for many people. You know, they look to their associations as being their organizations of record for their profession, for their industry, for the science that you know, and the research that goes into that. They look to organizations like associations as being this very trust-centered
isn't that everything for
type
an
of entity?
though?
Well, but here's the...
Yeah, I think you have to think, and I tell my clients this, you have to think of your association or your business or whatever. You have today your business is news. And so you have to think of it that way when you're communicating out and reaching out to your audience. So you know, for Matt, for Gary, your audience and your local news is spread out across the globe, but it's still local because it's that thing, that niche is still their backyard.
Yeah. Here's my thing for you guys. Like my issue, I have so many issues. My issue is that I
won't even go there.
Why is everyone laughing? Everyone.
The whole panel laughed.
I know.
And the tech.
People online are laughing. Oh, guys, it's like, you know me. So, but no, my thing is that, so while I said this, like it's fact, like, you know, associations are these great things that people have a lot of trust in and faith in. I had, you know, we had a guest a couple weeks ago, awesome guest. And he said, you know, associations just have you know, we don't have to worry about trust. We have trust, and just went on to another topic. And I put a pin in that, and I thought, I've got to come back to that, because actually I think that, we may be facing a time when that's up for question.
What, the trust?
I think so. And this is what I wanted to ask our guests, because once upon a time, it wasn't that you not only communicated and networked and all of this stuff in your profession on social media and all of these different places. You didn't go to a million different resources. But in an age now, when you are unsure of what the boundaries are between what's real and what's not real, you have deep fakes in video. You have the technology to change what it even looks like that somebody's saying on a video. You have the ability to pull, you know, facts and records from...
You're quoting facts there, right?
I'm quoting but you know, you're finding these things online, and I say you, I mean the press. We're finding things online that aren't necessarily verified. And so I think people are in general feeling this sense of distrust more now because we're in a state of change. We're in a state of a lot of change, and associations too, right? Well,
they're media companies now. They've got to be.
They have to be media companies.
Or they have to hire a company like Amplified Growth or Human Factor to help them with the media.
Well, okay,
but I mean, I'm only half joking there. I mean, you have to, if you can't do it, you got to find a way to get the word out for your message, right?
I mean, you do. I want to talk to these guys though, and find out how are you dealing with it on a strategic level, or just even philosophically as you're approaching communicating with your members like this. Are you feeling this? Are you seeing this?
Well, I'm curious to what they say, but don't you always have to treat it as you would any other relationship, that you have to constantly be working to build trust and constantly be working to show that the relationship between the two people matter? I mean, doesn't it just scale at that point?
This is Matthew. Is my connection okay?
Yeah, you went out for a little bit, but you're back with the red curtain. You look fantastic.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm at a hotel, so the connection I don't think is as wonderful as it would be. So at ISP, we truly have a global audience. Only a third of my members are in North America, a third are in Europe, a third are in the Asia Pacific region, and then the remaining members are in Latin America and in Africa. So we always try and strive to be sensitive about language in general. So whether it's using language that is, cliche language and that would be understood by an American audience but not understood globally, working towards that, working towards, so I think there's always that sensitivity. I do think, though, to your point about what's the book or what's the set of rules, I think it's really hard in that context to then have a set of rules. I think that there are a couple of things that at least I'm always sensitive to. And one is, I think people may come into reading and may have a perspective that is based on something bigger than you present yourself. So I first of all, don't try to take things personally. So it is impossible for me not to be an American when I communicate with people. We are a global organization, and in theory, as their executive director, CEO, I can sit in any region of the world and be able to do my job. However, I am an American, I have an American accent, and I sit in Washington, D.C. Those are facts. So as such, when I make comments, there may be some feelings or some assumptions that are placed upon me because of that understanding of what people may feel about what Americans think, do, or say. So I try to be sensitive to that. I try to recognize that, and I try to recognize that and talk about that with my team as we're building and sending communications out. I think we can debate whether or not that's fair, but I think it's fact. So it's not. To me, it's factual and is real. I also think that and maybe this is coming from again the scientific perspective of my members. I don't have as much of a concern if a member writes back because they don't like something that I'm saying. I look at it as an opportunity to engage with them in a dialogue. So maybe it's an apology because they understood something that wasn't my intention, or whether it's an opportunity to learn some nuance of a cultural competency that I wouldn't have had an opportunity to understand. I think when I go into our communications, and I think our team does, we sort of recognize that, I wouldn't say we recognize that we may offend every time we send something out, but we recognize the fact that it's impossible to truly understand and to be sensitive to all the cultural sensitivities that may exist. And we just try to do our best to navigate those and speak with respect and be as transparent if we miss that. So I think it's been a very humbling experience working in this job, because I think the ability to step in to sort of miss something is maybe higher. I don't know, higher, but it's high. And so I try to be as humble as I can and try to have my team work. We try to work together to support each other. And I rely on my volunteers to sort of check me on that as well, and their own perspectives that they bring. But I find that people are more forgiving than sometimes I am of myself, and so that's been kind of an important part.
I love that. Can we let's just hold on to that thought. I want to break for just a second. You guys who are watching live right now, we're going to break for just a second while we hear a word from our sponsor. We're going to come right back, and then we're going to come to an even better part of the section. We're going to get really...
Let's hear your tease.
Let me tease. I'm not teasing anything.
Tease
Are you kidding? We're going to come back. You're going to find out what's going to be happening at events like ASAE's Great Ideas. We're going to be doing all kinds of things, talking about all kinds of fantastic events. You guys, hold on to your horses. It's about to get crazy. Okay.
Welcome to Culture Tips, brought to you by Human Workplaces. Be brutally honest, that's number one. Look for patterns in your culture, that's the second one. Start with agility, then work on transparency. Technology is culture, don't you see?
Culture tip number 5. Technology equals culture. In this day and age, every organization relies heavily on technology to get the job done, but have you ever thought about the impact of your technology choices on culture? Because you should. The technology you use internally can facilitate the behaviors you know you need inside your culture to make you successful, or it can get in the way. So choose wisely. Does each department use a different internal collaboration tool? No wonder your silos are so strong. Are you using technology to enable peer-to-peer feedback, or is all the feedback top-down through your performance review? When you align your tech choices with your culture priorities, you'll see increased success.
That was Culture Tips, brought to you by humanworkplaces.net.
All right, so we're back. How was that? Don't you just love these segments? I am so thankful to our sponsors for giving us a little something, a little palate cleanser. Before we move on into other parts of the discussion. So again, if you're just joining us, then you've missed a fantastic part of the conversation. But
Shame on you.
You still have a chance, because we're talking with Gary LaBranche, with Matt Duva, and Nick Parker, and we're talking about the challenges that we face in communications today as leaders, as communications experts, when we're talking with so many different constituents. And so we've talked about a lot of the different challenges that we faced both at home and globally. But what I also wanted to find out is I wanted to start talking with you guys about the stories. And we heard just a couple of stories so far, but I want to maybe take a look at
people being professionally offended, that kind of thing?
People getting offended, people responding back, talking about the things that they're extremely sensitive about. And there are sometimes very good reasons for that. Quite an impressive radio voice, Kiki. I hate mine even after all these years. You guys rock. Thank you for writing in. That is awesome.
Let's get a story from one of these guys.
Well, you know what? I need a story from Nick, because I haven't heard... I want to hear Nick's voice. I feel like that's the music that we're missing right now.
The Nick's voice?
Yes.
Nick, tell us a story.
I was enjoying the music.
It's only going to be on for another 4 seconds. So.
Okay. 4 more seconds.
Nick!
You know, we right now in our community are the story that I'll tell you is actually what's happening right now. In our school district, the superintendent has launched a new mission about equity in education. So we're talking about diversity in the staff, how we're dealing with behavioral issues in there. And that's forcing this community to, at some point, we're going to have that conversation about race. And you said in the very beginning of the show, you talked about race, and it's hard, and gender discussions are hard. And this is a town, and Gary, I guess you lived in Kansas City once, so you know Lee Summit is a town. It's a very privileged town. It's a lot, very, very much white, and so it's hard. And I think when you talk about being offended and you talk about our biases when it comes to media and these conversations, it really all boils down to fear.
Yeah.
Everyone is afraid of being labeled something that's bad. People don't want to be called a racist. And so it's hard to talk about race and to talk about issues because we're all so scared that you might call me a racist. And so one of the things I've been trying to do is not only how to have that conversation, but how to facilitate at a local level that conversation in an effective way. And it's really difficult.
So what do you do?
It is hard. No, yeah. What do you do? Great question, Blake. Ding, ding.
Look at me. I got a great question. That never happens, guys.
Well, I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to take our podcast live, and we're going to do a town hall meeting, and we're going to bring the superintendent of schools, who happens to be an African American. We're going to bring a lot of people together, and we're just going to put all the questions out there, and we're going to see where we can go and almost force the conversation to happen.
Yeah, well,
good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's interesting because I think you're right. I think the fear a lot of times it causes us to definitely play it safe. And, I can say that even for Association Chat, as edgy and out there for the association community as I think Association Chat can sometimes be, I chicken out a lot.
I help her with this, guys.
Can I? I'm going to actually jump in and say I don't think it's the chicken.
What do you
effect.
think it is?
I think we're so at a broad 30,000-foot level of the society. We're so there's just rampant righteous indignation. We all want to be right, and I think we all look for that drop the mic moment, right? And we want those quick phrases to say we won. And we want to say that we picked the right team when we voted in the state and the national ones. And so I don't think it's chicken. I think it's we don't want to be wrong. I'll speak for
myself. I'll say I chicken out. I totally chicken out sometimes, and the reason why is because it is fear. I don't want to accidentally offend someone, and I feel also out of touch. Like I can't possibly keep up with all of the conversations, all of the acronyms, all of the everything that's going on. But
who can?
Well, I don't think anybody can. I really don't, unless that's what you...
I feel like a therapy session. So what are you scared of?
Well, it started with my mother. No, I'm scared of accidentally offending people, and yes.
But we already established you're going to. I mean, someone will be offended. He sent out a newsletter to 2,000 people, and people said he's anti-woman because he disagreed with a woman.
Jesus does feel like therapy. Gary, can you help me out here? Can I call a friend?
Yeah.
It's
Lifeline.
Yeah, can you call a friend? Helpline, whatever. I feel your pain here because I have a daughter who's in just a freshman year of college, and she happens to have been adopted. She's from India, was her birthplace. So we have, for the time she's been with us, 19 years, have been involved in conversations around race and that sort of thing. And I can give you some horrific stories about how people have responded to interracial families in a very negative way, things that would make you weep. Just it's amazing how much racism is not below the surface. That's right there on top of the surface. But my point is now, especially in last year in her senior year of high school and now in college, we have a new wrinkle in these conversations with my daughter and her friends and her whole group, which is the gender question. And the gender question is complicated by the whole scheme, the whole incredibly diverse world of pansexual, this kind of sexual, that kind of, the LGBTQ, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that whenever my daughter has a friend over, that person will say, my name is, and my pronouns are.
Yeah.
And so they have to distinguish what their pronouns are, what their gender is, and what their pronouns are. So it's not at all unusual to meet someone who appears to be male, cis male, who's 6'2" and 230 pounds, and says, my name is Christine, and I go by there and them.
Yeah.
And you sort of have to as an old person, I have to sort of take that in, and then you're constantly on guard because you don't.
But you're like, I can't trust the visual cues. Right.
But it's so hard because it's not the grammar I grew up with, right? First of all, so you've got to be. It's so easy to then, and my daughter, of course, being hypersensitive to this. If we make a mistake, even in private conversation about how was dinner at her house, it's not her, it's they, it's their house.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be very difficult for me.
Margot's your daughter.
So Margot's 11 years old, and she's already had questions, like meeting friends who were a little bit older in dance and stuff. Ask her, what's her sexual preference. And she came to me after to an 11-year-old.
Did she ask you, Mom?
She's like me. She's tall.
Mom, what's my sexual
older.
preference?
And she told me after I picked her up from dance one day. She said, that her friend had talked with her about it, and she said, "What do you mean, And she goes, "Well, do you like boys or girls?" She's like, "I like everybody," And she just
because I'm 11.
But here's the thing: is that I have friends who like pansexual, all the different stuff, and I can't keep it straight. I can't.
Yeah,
I can't. I'm gonna do my best, and I'm like, guys. I apologize ahead of time if I don't get it right. And I will say that someone watching was saying, while you're planning your open meeting, Nick, please include the issues for those who are non-binary and transgender and differently abled, ethnicity, etc. And Stacy says, we need better /more pronouns in the English language. Okay.
She's a writer.
She is a writer,
she would
actually.
Say that.
She's writing
more
for
words.
She's writing for the new association chat zine. So
all right.
Keep on.
More
Stacey.
pronouns.
Yes, more pronouns. I'll expect you to stay on top of those.
Yes. Let me know.
I'm doing my best, but I will say that it's definitely something that I'm constantly, on guard about, because I'm like, I want to address this issue, but I don't want to address it the wrong way. And I probably would have more discussions like this if I weren't afraid that I'd be ostracized or something for saying the wrong thing. And that's just me being being honest.
The smallest inconsequential mistake can be blown out of proportion just because you could be seen as not in touch or privileged in some way. Meanwhile, I'm meeting people for the first time, in a very, quick scenario at school, at the University of Arizona, in my daughter's case, and for 30 seconds. And then 2 months later, I'm supposed to remember their specific, pronouns and all that sort of thing. And I'm like, I can barely remember.
Well, it's a stress out. I mean, like you asked me to, I'm like that with numbers, and it's like somebody asked me to do a quick calculation, and I kind of freak out. That's the same kind of thing that happens. There's like a short circuit that happens in my brain. I'm like,
we never asked these guys their pronouns before we started.
I didn't.
Well, isn't what we're talking about, what we're talking about striving for here, isn't that what we're talking about is the thing that's missing from all of these conversations that we try to have, and that's context and empathy. I mean, that's what we're talking about that we strive for here.
That's a really good point.
That's the thing that makes all of these discussions hard, is because we seem to have lost
that's a really good point.
That ability to use context, to acknowledge context, and to have empathy for other
empathy and leadership, you guys.
Right, but I also think, I agree with that, but I also think that part of it is recognizing, I think sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get it completely right. And if somehow we don't get it right, we have to sort of talk it back as if we're trying to sort of reframe the question so that we weren't as wrong. and I think sometimes we just have to, I think we don't want to be wrong. Right, but I think people are wrong. Like sometimes you get it wrong.
I love this guy.
And that's what I kind of talked about earlier about, I think I have more of a sense of the fact that I'm going to miss a cultural norm when I send something out or when I have conversations with diverse groups. But I think part of it is I have found, at least, and maybe this is too idealistic, but I have found that I think sometimes we just have to be honest about the fact that we don't understand. We want to learn. Like if you legitimately can communicate to somebody, I'm sorry, I did not mean to offend. help me understand your perspective so that I can learn something here that I can better understand. But sometimes I think we don't feel, for some reason, we feel like we're supposed to know things that we don't know, and then we pretend to sort of understand and empathize when we don't have the context to empathize. So I think truly being empathetic is to be willing to be vulnerable, to say, I don't understand your perspective. I have no context for it. Can we take 5 minutes for you to actually explain it to me? And I'm going to sit here and listen to you and take the information in and recognize, and I'm going to learning. And I think
thank you.
That is awesome. I'm dinging in here, and you cued the applause.
Look, I'll say it.
We are so insane.
When he met the 6'3", 200-pound Christine, how on God's green earth were you supposed to know? I mean,
supposed to ask.
I know, but we have to ask. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if you ask, am I being offensive? Like, or am I supposed to know what? Things have changed, I guess, since
things have changed. I mean, you
have to ask, how should I address you? How do you prefer to be called? How should I address you? It's interesting. I'm starting to see now this in people's email signatures. For example, the rector of my church, under his email signature, the Reverend, Charles Decay, rector of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. My pronouns are he, him, that sort of thing. So, and I'm starting to see this more and more and more. That and I think this is all part of most people, in my view, that I know in my privileged world, and in most of my colleagues in the association community. Our job is to not offend. It is to be inclusive and to be collegial and to welcome people.
Right.
That's what we do. We try not to offend. We try to make people feel comfortable. And so I think part of the challenge with the whole concept of trust, and which then trust extends to the communication aspects, is that we try very hard to build that sense of community and trust. And what we become aware of these days, it is so hyper easy to be offensive to someone. And I think that's increasingly going to be a challenge going forward. And it's not for lack of caring or lack of authenticity or lack of meaning or empathy. It is simply there are more opportunities to slip up, even things that are unbeknownst to you, like a 6'2", 200-pound person preferring to go by a different pronoun that you would have imagined.
That's such a great point, actually. I mean, and I do feel like, we're really cutting to the heart of what some of this is, because I think, you are all, I know you all, and I know well-meaning people and good people, smart people who want very much, it is our role, to be inclusive and to do our very best to try to make everyone feel welcome and a part of, to belong to the association that we're running.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and it's, it's already something where I'm probably hyper aware of how other people are feeling, trying to be empathetic, trying to build that empathy in our leadership skills and in our leadership abilities and the people around us, trying to make sure that we have the right people that are around the table to be diverse. And we're putting a lot of pressure, right, Matt? You were talking about, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Gary's saying we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Nick's saying we do. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get it right, and we're not always going to get it right. Stacy says, I know a few transgender people, including a former in-law, and they understand that we're not conditioned to speak in they or their, but appreciate that we try. They're pretty understanding about it. Michael says, have you considered that some marketing concepts actually make conversations in context more difficult? One example is the idea of first in mind. Say it first and faster than anyone else. Dana says, you clearly have good intent and integrity. That makes the difference in me trusting your organization or any. She says, I find it much less stressful to be told whether a person prefers he or she or another pronoun than to figure it out myself. It's very true.
That's true. That is true.
I like that one comment about talking about speed and trying to be first. I think that's hurts context a lot when our social media tools. There's so many choices now, and you always want to get it out there, and you want to respond quickly because people want a quick response. But sometimes we lose context, and we lose that ability to give context to a conversation.
Well, we have.
And my media snob will come out, and that's why old newspapers were fantastic.
I mean, don't you sometimes?
On the TV.
You sometimes wish that we could go back when we didn't have the expectation of responding immediately, right?
Mm-hmm. But I also the other point that I would make is I don't know if this is sort of taking us a little bit off topic, but I do think that's why it's really important as association leaders to be committed to representation and diversity among our leadership and our decision-making bodies. Because the more diverse we can be, the more perspectives we can bring to the table, the more helpful it is for all of us to be able to be more sensitive and to be more empathetic, because we can learn from each other.
That's so true.
And, I think that's a critical piece of this, because that will help this process along, no matter how things evolve in the future.
I think it's a great point. That is an aspect of the criticality of diversity that I think is something that we need to all keep in mind. That we're starting to see, because of whether it's social media or the proliferation of communication channels, or just simply the greater ability for all of us, especially association leaders, to connect with so many people from different points of view and different walks of life and different philosophies, that we need to be more open and inclusive of not only people and types but points of view, because that enriches the whole experience for everyone. And we have to keep in mind that actually is critical to in creating this sense of trust. Everybody probably in this group I know, probably, and certainly most of the people in the association committee will know Glenn Tecker, Glenn Tecker and Associates International Consultants, been around a long, long time, co-author of The Will to Govern Well. In his CEO symposia, he uses the phrase, trust is the residue of promises kept.
Trust is the residue.
Trust is the residue of promises kept. Right?
That's good.
In other words, we build trust by keeping our promises, by delivering to people what we say that we're going to deliver, or behave in a way that they expect us to behave, and that sort of residue of doing the things that we say we're going to do over and over and over builds this level of trust. I think as a piece of that, going back to what Matt was saying, that the more ability we have to seek out and engage and work with this variety of range of diversities, and being able to respond to all of those different groups, is a piece of that building, that creation of the residue of promises kept, of working with different people in different ways. That, I think, builds that sort of shell, if you will, of at least give people the benefit of the doubt. Here we look at ABC organization and we see that they're inclusive and open, and their leadership and their staff are diverse and they're open to different folks, and that gives us comfort that they're trustworthy. And now we have to figure out, will they perform? And versus looking at an association that seems closed and we don't see everyone represented, that gives us pause to wonder if we could trust them.
Well said.
I think that's a piece.
I don't think I
agree.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I agree, but I also think that the more representative groups' decision-making bodies are, the more diverse they are, the better the group gets at responding and being vulnerable and being agile to changes that are happening in our world and changing perspectives. And I think like anything, these are the types of learned skills that we as leaders have to build in our governing bodies, because this kind of change, whether we're talking about pronouns or whether we're talking about how groups of people work together or whatever is going to become and is, I think, normal now. And this is what life is. And I just think that building that skill set comes from building diverse groups that have voices in the decision making process.
I love that.
I love that he put vulnerable in that list at the beginning. I almost want to steal Kiki's job and ask him to expand on that a little more.
Don't do that. Don't do that. We got to wrap up, man.
I love that you put vulnerable in.
It is good. I'm going to ask you guys just as we close out, because this has been a fantastic discussion, but we do need to close out. I did have a request from somebody watching live if we can share who is where on the screen. And the way that we're going to do this, guys, we're going to play a little game.
All right.
And I'm going to ask for each one of you to share your name and one thing you absolutely trust in this world without hesitation. And we're going to start with the man in the top left corner.
That'd be Nick.
Well, Nick's got to say his name and the thing he absolutely trusts.
Say hi, Nick, and the absolute thing you trust.
That's me. I'm not in the top left, I guess. Oh, I'm Nick Parker, and here,
we'll start with
I'll
Nick.
say it. I trust the media.
Oh. He trusts the media? Wow. Oh, my gosh. Okay, well then...
There are more of those good ones out there than you think.
Smoking.
Then let's go to Gary. Gary.
I had to play that.
Well, I'm glad to know there's one out there. Thank you. I think that's great. I'm Gary LaBranche, and I trust the people that work hard, that try their hardest, that might not have been given everything in the world, but they want to make a go of it for themselves and for their families, and they're salt of the earth type people that are working hard for the right reasons and are willing to give back to their community and share with others. Those are who I trust.
That's beautiful. All right, Matt, you're up.
I'm Matthew Duva. Well, I think I have to say, and I believe it too, but I trust science. I trust data. I trust facts, which I think exist in the world and are out there to be validated. But I would sort of humbly agree with Gary and say that I trust people who are willing to be vulnerable, people who ask questions, and who recognize and acknowledge when they don't know something, and when they, because I think it gives them credibility. But I've got to say, I trust.
Well, I have to say thank you to all of you. This was fantastic. And guys,
last show.
This is, well, it's not the last show ever.
Last show.
It's the last show
Winter
for this
show.
season, yes. And I trust all of you. I trust in Association Chat and this wonderful community, and I'm so thankful that we have you watching online right now. Those of you who are listening to this later are part of it. And if you want to find out more, go to associationchat.com. Until next time, everyone, keep asking questions to learn every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Association Chat, produced by Amplified Growth and Human Factor. For more information on Amplified Growth, go to amplifiedgrowth.net. And for more information on making podcasts for your association, go to Human Factor at humanfactor.net. To hear past episodes, go to the Association Chat YouTube channel and subscribe. See you soon!